Welcome to Two Trick Pony, a twice-monthly podcast where we explore all the ways that people have found and cultivated their second tricks. We're your hosts. I'm Melissa Betters.
And I'm Claire Ma, and we thank you for joining us. Each week, we invite guests onto the show who have broken away from the expectations of their training, education, or CV to find fulfilling hobbies or even entirely new careers.
We take a look at how cultivating a multifaceted self can lead you to community, connection, and confidence.
This week, we're going to be joined by April Lee, who took the plunge and left her government job to pursue a freelancing career in data visualization and the arts. Along the way, she revisited her creative interests from childhood, explored her spirituality, and discovered her personal authenticity.
Our conversation with our guest today is a little different than our usual show. April gives us an unusually candid look into her personal journey and the difficulties that come with pursuing achievement. In today's episode, she describes her experience searching for purpose. April's story is a narrative about soul-searching, exploration, and the sometimes painful trial and error process it takes to learn who you are.
April's story touches upon a lot of the other themes that our guests have delved into these past few months. You'll hear a bit about her intellectual background and how she wanted to reconnect with the physical world. We talked about the dangers of burnout and what she calls serial craft dabbling as she searched for what could bring her joy. You'll also hear how April makes an important distinction between being motivated creatively and unhealthy overwork. I think it's an important lesson, especially for the overachievers and perfectionists among us.
On our show, we've always wanted to emphasize the many different ways people build resilience through their second tricks. We're big proponents of centering personal creativity for better well-being, and today's episode is an important reminder to step back and listen to yourself when your health and body tell you something's wrong.
We think you'll find this episode to be an interesting look into how someone's soul-searching journey, especially after building a successful career, might reflect your own.
And with that, we'll turn to our conversation today with April Lee, who is calling in from Boulder, Colorado.
We're excited to bring on April Lee to the show, so thank you, April, so much for coming on to Two Trick Pony.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is my first podcast.
So we just want to start off with a question about you. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what we are going to talk about today.
I'm in a stage of life where that is a really hard question to answer. I used to be a data analyst at the Department of Energy, and I was there for more than 10 years. And then I quit to take a sabbatical to explore other interests and figure out my next path. Currently, I'm a freelance data visualization designer and consultant. I help businesses analyze and visualize their data. But the freelancing is sort of an extension of my old career and just one small part of this much bigger healing and discovery journey that I've been on for the past almost 5 years. When I quit my job, I didn't have a specific new career in mind. I just knew I was meant to be contributing to the world in a different way. So my main goal with my sabbatical was to dissolve and let go of my previous life, which had been driven by all things intellectual. I spent all day, every day focused on brain work to the detriment of a lot of other things in my life. So I wanted to turn my brain off and ground back into myself, my physical body, and into the earth and nature and my surroundings. And I wanted to reconnect with my intuition and be able to express my creativity more freely. So the first thing I did was take a course on Western herbalism, and I dove into gardening too. It was very healing, and it was exactly what I needed at the time. But from that experience, I learned that herbalism wasn't meant to be my vocation like I thought it was. It was more just a body of knowledge that would help me in my life to support my health and my loved ones. Then my partner and I moved to Boulder from the DC area, and I got into so many different things here. One thing to know about me is I'm a serial craft dabbler. I've done DIY craft projects all my life since I was a kid. And as an adult, I loved going to craft classes with friends, especially when I lived in Austin, where there seemed to be a lot of options all the time. But then when I moved to Boulder, I didn't really find the same things here. And so then that got me to thinking that maybe I could recreate those kinds of craft classes myself. So I started putting together lots of different ideas for fun and easy and beautiful craft projects. And last year, for the first time, I taught a craft class, and it was to make gemstone wire tree sculptures. It was a really cool experience, and I'd never been a teacher before, and I really enjoyed that empowering others aspect of teaching. Another thing I delved into was doing voiceovers. I volunteered for a local nonprofit, recording myself reading newspaper articles for blind people to listen to. And from that, I learned that 1, voiceover is harder than it looks. And 2, I thought I'd be interested in like nonfiction voiceover type stuff, but I actually had a lot more fun doing the voice acting stuff that I was at first, I think, too timid to believe I could do. So that was also a learning experience, and I'm not sure I'll pursue anything further with that, but I did pick up a lot of useful skills. One holiday season, I worked for a local company making handmade German gingerbread cookies. And the big thing I learned there was just how much I loved working on fine, detailed, creative work with my hands. I was really good at it, and I really enjoyed it. And so along those lines, at the same time, I reconnected with pottery, which I'd done in school a long time ago. And getting back into pottery has been a huge part of this journey. I just did my second art market recently, and it was a lot more successful than my first one. And I'm slowly working to build up my pottery business. Another thing I did that was pretty spontaneous and unplanned was launch a community sharing movement called Hanging Coffees Boulder, where people can buy extra coffees or meals at local cafes and donate them to people in need. This little side passion project developed pretty randomly, and it ended up getting featured on the local news earlier this year, and I did my first TV interview, which was really exciting. And finally, most recently, I've been building business trackers for solopreneurs like myself to help them get organized with their self-employment life. So to help them track things like expenses and how much they've set aside for taxes and how much their actual take-home pay is. It's very different when you're not a salaried employee and you have to track all these things yourself. And so this idea came about because in the past few years, I've had to build all these different tools for myself to try to launch and manage all of my projects. So I thought this could be something helpful that I could provide to others who are trying to break into self-employment and build up their side hustles or their new paths. So yeah, it's been quite an adventure, and it's been a very creatively fertile time for me these past few years.
How did you first start thinking about wanting to have this kind of creative life, and what motivated you to move in that direction?
I've always had a creative life. In college, I studied psychology and cognitive science, and along with the math and science, I was always taking art classes too. I remember in college, one semester, I did a half course on costume design just because it sounded fun. And I did lots of other art, like printmaking and photography and ceramics and lots of other stuff. So then when I got out of college, I was interested in energy and renewable energy. So I went to grad school for environmental science and policy, and that's how I ended up at the Department of Energy. In my data analyst career, I naturally gravitated toward data visualization because it's the most creative thing you can do as a data analyst at a data agency. I was able to find some creative fulfillment through data viz. And that's also why when I started freelancing, I stuck with the data viz. Eventually, for a number of reasons, with my career established and everything, I started delving deeper into the essence of who I was. One of the things I uncovered was a desire to be more authentic to my soul and a desire to express my creative self more fully, more authentically. And so that's what led me eventually on this path. I was in my early 30s, and up to then, I had always been this pretty hard charging person that was just like push, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. And I didn't have a healthy lifestyle. Or more like it was I didn't have a healthy mindset about how to live my life and what my priorities were. And so by the time I got to my 30s, my body was like, we can't do this anymore, you know? And so I ended up getting these episodes of fatigue, and I had digestive problems, and it kind of came out of nowhere. I'd always been pretty healthy my whole life, and that literally stopped me short. And so there was this long road of seeing doctors and trying to get well again. I had adrenal fatigue, which I think is becoming more well known, and it's when you just live in a high stress lifestyle all the time and you've got high cortisol all the time, your body, your hormones, it just goes out of whack. And so I was working on that, and then at the same time, I started doing spiritual healing. I was introduced to Kundalini yoga from my sister, and that was really powerful. It was really healing to feel that warmth and softness that Kundalini yoga gives you, and it gets really deep into certain things. So there was just a couple of years where I was working on both my physical healing and my spiritual healing. And it's like that saying, you know, you don't appreciate something until you've lost it. And I never appreciated until then how much energy I had, how much passion and enthusiasm I had that I kind of maybe abused, you know, how much I had, until I didn't have it anymore. And I had to realize, what am I doing? And so in that healing process, my view of the world also changed. And I realized my past career was very fulfilling to me, and I felt like I did make a difference in those areas. But it didn't make sense to me anymore, and I knew that it wasn't actually the way I was meant to contribute to the world and how I was meant to express myself in the world. I think the path is made up of a million tiny micro steps that you don't necessarily even realize played a part until much later. I think the biggest idea I had at the time was that I wanted to unlearn everything I had learned up to that point. I wanted to undo all of the conditioning I had received from my family, my lineage, my community, and just society in general. It's also broken in so many ways, and I wanted to dismantle all of that and start fresh with a blank slate. I remember I started therapy maybe 5 years before I quit my job, and that was just the start of many, many things I did to work on dismantling my inner barriers. Understanding myself better was also a big part of that work. If you've ever heard of the Enneagram personality types, I highly recommend exploring that and learning about your type. For me personally, it played a surprisingly huge part in helping me understand myself and make peace with certain aspects of myself. It also really helped me understand how differently each of us views the world and how we each walk in the world. It just explained so much to me. And if you're curious, I'm a type 8 wing 7, and if you're familiar with the Enneagram, that probably tells you all you need to know about what my life has been like. Type 8s are called the Challenger, and I've definitely lived up to that name. So yeah, I had to go on this healing journey first because I had to build up the inner resources and capacity to even start considering taking such a huge leap of faith into the unknown.
Can you talk a little bit more about your pivot to freelancing and what that experience has been like for you?
If anybody wants to fast track their personal growth, I highly recommend trying freelancing. Because once you work for yourself and you're calling all the shots and you have no schedule and it's all up to you and you have clients and everything, you just learn so much and you have to confront so much. I learned about boundaries, setting them, enforcing them, and I learned about my own expectations for things, and then also pricing your services, and this is for pottery too, pricing your products. There's so much that gets wrapped into pricing. It is so difficult, and one of those things is like your own self-worth. What is the value of your time? And are people willing to pay for that? And are you comfortable with asking for that much money? There's so much you have to learn when you're freelancing and doing this all yourself.
Was there any moment when you felt especially proud or excited about what you were doing or what you were accomplishing?
My dad used to get a lot of magazine subscriptions, and he used to get Inc. magazine, INC, which was all about startups. And I remember reading this in high school, and I used to think business owners were these amazing people, like super authorities or ultra experts or something. And I never thought I ever had that sort of authority. Like me, start a business? I could never, And yet, at the same time, I think maybe I had this sort of tiny, tiny piece of knowledge that maybe I was interested in that. And maybe that's why I read these magazines, because it intrigued me. So I'm pretty proud of how far I've come since then, and how far I've continued to expand my own conception of what I'm capable of. And actually, once you start one business, it's really easy to start a lot of other ones. Once you learn the process, you're like, okay, it's not bad at all. You just do this and you do that and you're in business.
Freelancing is, as we said, it can be risky, it can be unstable, it can be really scary. But you had all of these health problems that you developed because of the stress of your previous career. Can you talk a little bit about how sort of just the spiritual growth, even going into something that's on paper potentially more stressful than what you left, how has that spiritual healing kind of taken effect? And how do you manage the stress of what you're currently doing compared to what you did before?
I think there's a big difference in the type of stress. In my old job, there was stress from the job, but a lot of it was also self-imposed stress that came from pushing myself to do certain things. For example, to be productive to a certain level or to prove myself to others. It was a lot more external validation-driven stress. Whereas nowadays, there can still be a lot of stress, and there is a meltdown like every 3 months as I feel lost and try to figure out what to do, what's next, or what's not working. But underneath all that, there is this really, really deep joy and contentment because I know I'm honoring my heart and I'm on that path to fulfilling that call. The other thing is that there are a lot of things now that don't stress me out nearly as much as they would have stressed out old me. And one of the biggest changes that's happened is I've gone from needing things to go exactly as I want them to or as I planned for things to happen to flipping that and seeing if things don't work out, then it wasn't meant to be. That door was closed on purpose. And so I move on. And I stay a lot more flexible and a lot more open to surprising twists and turns. I think that has played a huge part in reducing the kind of unhealthy, unsustainable stress.
I wanted to get a better idea of what the resources were that you found helpful.
I would say one of the things that has been most helpful is thinking back on what you love to do as a kid, because those are often the most pure expressions of your soul. All of the things that I've done in the past 5 years, all those projects, there were different threads of those interests appearing all through my life. And so it's been a matter of reconnecting those dots and bringing it forward and exploring them further. So often there isn't necessarily something totally new, and it's a very natural evolution of things that you expressed in your life from really early on. I would say be open to what comes your way and follow up on all those little intuitive nudges or thoughts or gut feeling type things that just come to you or that you just find yourself drawn to.
people who might be interested in pursuing a bunch of different things, right? It can be really intimidating. So I think it's a really good piece of advice to kind of go back to when you weren't so worried about that, when you're a kid and you just were actively exploring the world around you. I think it's important to kind of remember that we can still do that. So what were some of the obstacles that you encountered during this creative journey that you've been on? And when you encountered those types of obstacles, what kept you motivated to keep going?
I used to be like so many other young folks where we had it ingrained in our heads that we had to do everything perfectly. Like we had to have the perfect resume and go to the right schools and the jobs, and all of that had to show success. And so obviously, like everyone else, I got really scared of failure or looking bad or making the wrong choice. And one thing I've learned on this journey is you just have to go and try and do it and learn from it. And it's not a failure because you learned from it. And that step propels you on to the next one. Another thing that has been an obstacle and motivation is it's been really interesting that in this journey of freelancing and these other projects, I would get triggered in various ways, with client relationships or just how projects were going. It forced me to confront these hangups that I had, all these sorts of various hangups. And they were obstacles, but they were the most useful instructional obstacles, because they told me what things I still had inside to dissolve. I'm in this rhythm where if something comes up and triggers me in some way, it's something I welcome because it's something that I can work on to resolve and release and then never experience it again. And I've seen this happen now several times, many times, where things that used to really bother me are now non-issues. And that's been really gratifying to see, and for sure has kept me going.
Was there anyone in your life who was particularly encouraging or helpful to you along this kind of path to discovery that you've been on?
My parents definitely had the most impact. They were in some ways like traditional Asian parents in that they wanted us to work hard and succeed, but at the same time, they never pressured me to do anything or study any particular field. And when we were growing up, they did prioritize art and music along with the math and science. I think my parents are actually very creative people, and they never had the chance to express that creativity. So I think they are giving us the opportunities they never had. And I see that they're living through me these days, watching my adventures and pursuing my art. And they really support it because they never had the chance to do it.
Why do you think it's important for people to pursue secondary, even more than secondary, in your case, interests or hobbies like this?
I think it's important for everyone to explore creativity, specifically because I think all of us universally are creative beings. And I think that the world we live in right now, a lot of people's creativity is getting misdirected into, it's getting funneled into what tiny little nooks and crannies exist in people's lives for creativity. And I think it's unnatural how, buttoned up we are. I think we are all born creative. If your main work isn't giving you that creative fulfillment or that channel for expression, then I think hobbies and side gigs are a potential opportunity to get that fulfillment, but also maybe to learn more about yourself. It's like when you stir the pot, lots of things come up. And I think that's why it makes sense for everyone to pursue things that interest them outside of their one trick.
So you've tried a lot of different things, as we've talked about. Do you have any kind of next hobby or skill that you might consider trying, or that you're kind of looking ahead to the future as, hey, maybe I might want to try this next?
I do, yeah. One of the things I'm currently working on is studying feng shui, which is the Chinese art of laying out and arranging houses. And I've been taking a course on the traditional classical feng shui, which is like the really old 5,000-year-old compass-based version of feng shui. And kind of generally, I'm trying to learn more about the Chinese five arts, I think it's called, where they're all related. It includes traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture and herbalism, and Chinese astrology, divination, and martial arts and qigong, and also feng shui. And they all come from the same system of understanding of the world. And I've recently found that really interesting. And so I've been learning more about that. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I've always loved analyzing homes, and I've loved figuring out how to arrange my house. I've moved so many times in my adult life, and I think part of it was this love for arranging houses. And I'm also just open to discovering things that haven't even gotten on my radar yet. You know, who knows, next year maybe something completely new will just take over everything. It's clear to me, though, that I do want creativity to be the main part of my life. And so that involves making money from it too. And I'm still exploring, exactly what I want to do and how and where, and I don't have the answers yet. One thing I have learned is that success comes from authenticity. You might see different people on Instagram, lots of artists or businesses, and they're wildly successful doing their thing. And you look at what they're doing and you might say, oh, I could do that. I could sell whatever, or I could do that same thing. But if you were to do it and try to exactly replicate them, it wouldn't work for you because it's not authentic to you. And so that's the thing I'm grappling with now, which is, what is the most authentic form of creative work for me? And that's something I'm still learning, but I have full faith that I'm going to get there and it's going to all work out. One of the books that helped me with that was Everything is Figureoutable by Marie Forleo. She talks about how you can't just sit at home and think about an option and armchair figure out if it will work. You just have to go out and do it, and then you'll learn instantly, if it's going to work for you or not. So that was really good advice for me and helped me to just try a lot of things. And some things didn't work out. I stayed at some things for a couple of weeks and I quickly found out it wasn't going to work, but I had to do it to find out. Early on in the journey, Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff was really helpful for me. And that was one of the first things that helped soften my inner critic and allowed me to open up to, the whole rest of it. You can't start healing until you allow the ugliness to come out. Also, Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. It's really short. It's, I think, one of her early books. That one was also helpful in that way of letting things come out and letting the imperfect you come out and have it be okay. You can just sit there with the feelings, or it doesn't automatically mean anything about you. And then as I got deeper into doing things, Setting Boundaries Will Set You Free by Nancy Levin, that was helpful. And there are a lot of different boundaries books out there, and I think they're all kind of equally helpful. It's just sort of learning the concepts. And then as I got deeper into spiritual things, Awakening Intuition by Mona Lisa Schultz was really interesting. It kind of fell into my lap. It was just a really fascinating look because it linked our emotional health to physical ailments. She talks about how different inner issues like pent-up anger or not respecting your boundaries or not having a voice and not putting your voice out into the world and letting other people make decisions for you, all of these things are related to different illnesses that you might see later. And another one, it's a spiritual book, but it's really accessible to mainstream, and it's called You Are Badass by Jennifer Sincero. It's really funny because that one really, when the universe gives you nudges, that one really fell into my lap. And I was prejudiced against it because I saw it and I was like, that sounds like a really lame title. It's so cheesy. It's not for me. And this lady was giving away free books, and she gave me all 4 of them, even though I said I didn't want that one. And then I was packing up to move to Boulder, and it was still on my bookshelf. And I was like, all right, let me just skim this really quick, and then I'll put in a little free library. But then I started skimming it, and it really got me, and I loved it. And I ended up reading the whole thing. And so it was really funny because I actively did not want to read that book. But in it, she translates all of these spiritual lessons into a very mainstream, accessible way. And she's really funny too, and she's really over the top. But she has that book, and she has a money version called You Are a Badass at Making Money. And that one is about the abundance mindset and all of those kind of money blocks and stories that we have about money that prevents us from making money. When you get the right message at the right time, it really hits you and it changes you. And that's what all of these books and many others did for me.
So thank you so much, April, for talking with us today. It's been really fascinating to hear about your journey, both the physical healing, the spiritual healing, and just this ability to take risks and jump into the unknown.
Yeah, so is there anywhere that people can find you or your work, if you have any social link, websites, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have a website. It's Leapr Studios, LEEAPR Studios, .com. And Leapr Studios on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on to Two Trick Pony. This has been a really amazing conversation, and it's been really fun for me in particular to hear more about all of the amazing things that you've been a part of. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been really fun to talk about this, and it's a good chance to reflect on the path I've taken. You know, you don't often take time to really think back and synthesize what really happened. So thanks for having me.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will be back for our next episode in 2 weeks.
If you want to get in touch with us, or if you know a two-trick pony who would be a great fit for the show, please let us know by email at twotrickponypodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at twotrickponypodcast. Those are both with the number 2.
And if you liked this podcast, please rate us and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.